here. Uh-oh. We're live now.
We're live.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
everything that we say can be held against us.
And possibly in a court of law.
Right.
All right. So color grading. The one thing that I will say is I don't really have a system for color grading. I've tried to develop one and I think I'm sort of getting there. Um, I'll talk you through what I've done with color grading, but the bottom line that I've learned from talking to David Van Diemen, David Bird, even whoever it was that invented the infinite color panel. I haven't talked to him, but I've watched a lot of his educational videos, and I bought the infinite color panel, Pratik Nayak. Um, it's all a matter of taste and what you like and what you think is going to help enhance the image. I use color grading as the last thing that I do before I get ready to export my images. I know that was a question that came up today. And the reason I do that is because when I started learning how to do color grading when you're doing composites, and I think you know this too, the color grade sort of gets all of the elements that might not quite match, sort of it gets cohesive. So it's how I've developed things. It's how I do it. I do all my retouching first. I do all the dodging and burning, and then I start looking at color grading and then adding a matte. That's my process. I know there's other folks that do the color grading first, but I do not. I always do it last. I don't know what order you do it in, but
Well, I mean, just in testing everything that I've tried to do, I mean, I think I've heard you say before that you do all the corrections first
yep.
and then add on the other things to it. So that's kind of what I followed with you. I guess my biggest thing is like, for instance, I do seniors. Like our work is completely like it's night and day difference as far as our style and what we're drawn to. But we still kind of have this I think if the word is cohesive kind of thing, like we like the dramatic. We like the thing. I love the dramatic. I love the shadows. I love all this stuff. So color grading takes what I do already and to that next level, which is what it does
Yep.
to yours.
Mm-hmm.
You've already taken, like, you have this amazing story, this amazing scene, and then all of a sudden you take, like, I think of color grading as like a mood, like
Yeah.
it gives you that extra mood. And so I'm kind of trying to figure out with my seniors, um, guys are easy to do that with
Mm-hmm.
because I go for more. I wonder sometimes if that works with the girls to color grade with all them. But to answer your question, because I'm kind of answering this a long ways, is that I usually edit first, do all my corrections, edit, then decide the color grade. And because of the fact that I'm so new to it, sometimes I add it and I'm going, is it too blue? Is it too, and I never know. And then
Yep.
I'll look at yours and I'm going, wow, that's a lot. But there's must be a step that I'm missing
Okay.
because yours looks so much more natural than mine.
And that's the other thing too that I've learned. Anybody that I've done any education with in Photoshop has always said, you know, you get it to the point where you think you really like it, you've been working on it for a while, and then you got to pull it back a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you always
Right.
make it a little bit more subtle than maybe what you the first thing that hits you in the face, because you don't want to have somebody print it out and go, God, that looks just green. This person looks like
Right.
Shrek.
Right.
Um, and so it's one of those things. It's a balance that you've got to come to. And one of the things that I try to do when I am color grading for my seniors, because I do it with them too, and they don't really necessarily know that's what I'm doing. They pick out of a gallery that is completely unedited, and that might be a little bit unique for me versus other people that do IPS. Um, I always tell them, pay attention to the poses. I'll send them 3 example edits of, okay, this is sort of what I'm kind of thinking. Um, compare it to the completely unedited photos, pick out the poses that you want, and then I do the editing. Usually when I have, like, if they'll pick out like 8 or 10 photos. If I have 3 photos that are in the same location and sort of have the same feel, I want to make sure the color grade is the same for all 3 of those. And so that's one of the things I really focus on, especially, and I'll show you some of the stuff. I don't know if you saw some of the stuff I put out there that I did with Christy Perez at the Indiana State Capitol, and I did this last week. we did 3 different sets, basically with a similar outfit, just added a few different accessories in the same environment, and I have 3 individual sets because I've color graded them all quite differently. And so we were able to get that material, number 1, because Christy can pose like I mean, I had her standing on a chair and we got really great images, and then I had her sitting on a set of stairs and also great images. But anyways, I intentionally made all of those. I tried to make them very separate just by the color grading. I still retouched them all very similarly. I did dodging and burning probably in the same places I normally would, but the color grading is what set all 3 of them apart. And so it sets a mood like you were talking about. And it's the last thing I do. But let me talk you through sort of my journey in color grading. I'd never even heard of it until I took a class from David Van Diemen. As soon as I took my first compositing class, we talked a little bit about it, and to be honest, I had no idea what the hell he was talking about. I know that's hard to believe, but yeah, I was like color grading. Yeah, okay, yeah, this is great, and I'd like there's Homer Simpson blank 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 in my brain. Eventually, I sort of get it around my second class because I started asking questions about it, and then I started realizing that I can make my composites become more cohesive. Well, then I took it to another step, and I realized I can really, even the ones that I'm not doing composites on, I can really set a mood or a feeling for my photos using that technique. So, all right, with all of that aside, because I've been yapping my gums for a while here, I'm going to
No,
share.
you're good. It's good to explain all this stuff because
Yeah.
it's kind of because I think that a lot of us, like, I never realize how much color grading that we see that we don't even realize that we're seeing in our everyday watching TVs or movie or something like that, and the mood that
Mhm.
it sets. I'm trying to think of a recent movie that I just saw that the whole color grade of it was this very moody blue,
Mhm.
and the whole mood, and I can't remember, I'll have to remember what it was, but once, and I think it was you, Brad, when I started noticing your work and seeing stuff, I noticed a change of when you started doing the color grading, and it was like it took a concept that you had, and it, like, all of a sudden you added like this, like, I'm very like I like using similarity things, words to, but it's almost like you added like this melody to your work, and like all of a sudden it brought it all together, and it was just like, man, color
Yeah.
grading can make that big of a difference. And I'm not, don't think that I'm telling you, oh my gosh, your work was not this or that before and all of a sudden
No,
you discovered color grading,
yeah,
but
I know what you're saying.
it was like I felt it. I
Yeah.
felt it. It's like you hit all the right chords on this picture with just this color grading. And that was where I was like, okay, what is the secret?
Yeah.
Because that is the difference between just a picture and the actually telling the story and feeling the
Yeah.
picture. So
And now you're going to be very disappointed in me when I show you my process.
see, if you wouldn't say anything, I probably wouldn't be disappointed. I'd be like, oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Now, I'll show you some of the techniques that I use,
Okay.
and some of them that I've learned about that I don't use. Some of them are very simple, but I'll show you where I started, and that is, I mean, I'll be very straightforward. The first technique that I ever used for color grading, I bought one of David Van Diemen's actions, and I still use it every time I retouch a picture. And it's a portrait action, but it's a Photoshop action that puts a whole bunch of layers in there. And the top layer is the color grading layer. I use that. I still use it for some things. And there's one little tiny piece of that of that layer stack that he adds that I use, and it's just a color fill layer. And that sounds super simple, but it makes a big difference. From there, I bought another add-in for Photoshop from David Bird that is, I mean, it's intentional for color grading, but there's only 4 color schemes for it. And it's hard to see what it's doing behind the scenes. It's really good, and I use it for a long time. maybe about a year ago, I'm like, okay, this is fine, but I want to get away from just four different color schemes. And so I started adding like color adjustment layers to the layers that were getting added, and it just didn't. I felt like it was just messing it all up. So recently, maybe 6 weeks ago, I bought the Infinity Color Panel, and that's great. Except all it does is you push a button and then it spits out a color grade. And then if you push the button again, it spits out another color grade. But what that's allowed me to do is it adds these uh, folder or layers in Photoshop, and they're all the same. And there's 5 different ones, and it allowed me to turn them on, turn them off, and sort of figure out, okay, what do I like about what this is doing? And so I think I'm kind of come down to I kind of know what my process is going to be from here on out. But anyways, let me show you all of these things I just talked about.
Okay, cool.
So I'm going to share my screen. And can you, uh-oh. I'm trying to share my screen. Is it not sharing my screen? Okay. All right.
There we go.
You see Lightroom?
I do.
Okay, I don't know why this is, why am I, okay, the zoom thing just, all right, like the zoom thing was getting in the way, sorry.
Okay.
And I'm going to move this over here. You probably can't see what I'm doing, but that's fine. So you can see Christy in the picture here, I think, and this is my Lightroom. So one of the things that was brought to my attention maybe about 2 years ago, they're called lookup tables.
Okay.
Lookup tables, and I think I talked about this in one of my education things. Lookup
Mhm.
tables are what are used to color grade films. Like they use those, it gets overlaid on top of the digital film, and it's applied to every frame in the film. So in Lightroom, and I think you can do this in Bridge because this whole thing looks the same in Bridge, I think. This whole
Mhm.
this whole control panel, but you can go to this little panel here where it says Profile Adobe Color,
Right.
and you pull this little 4 squares up, and all of a sudden you've got these general Adobe settings, but I have a whole bunch of lookup tables added here. And so I can apply a color profile that really like, okay, skin tone manipulation. Okay, these are all teal and orange family. So you can see it's making very subtle changes to the photos. And that's one way to do color grading. I don't necessarily like it. I've tried it and it just it doesn't really speak to me very much. It doesn't make
Okay.
enough changes for my taste. And maybe I haven't found the right lookup tables. I have about 100 of them. And I've tried them and I just kind of The other thing that you can do in Lightroom and I think Adobe Camera Raw and Bridge is you can use the color grading here,
Mm.
and you can actually make presets.
Okay.
So like you can mess around with the midtones here at the top, the
Mhm.
shadows and the highlights, and you can change the color. Like you can go really drastic, right?
So I've actually played with these
Mm-hmm.
and thought I actually the photo that I sent you or that we both picked,
Mm-hmm.
I actually on that gallery discovered this like in
Mm-hmm.
Photoshop. Like I'm whenever something new comes up, it scares me. Like I don't want to mess up. I don't want to, do anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But in my Photoshop, it has come up and this tool is actually it's incredible.
It
It's
is.
very forgiving too. Like if you
Yep.
don't like it, you just,
You just
go back.
reset it back to zero.
You reset it. Yeah.
The other thing that's neat about this is that I like is that you can really go like all the way with that red, and
Yeah.
then you can take the balance and mess with the balance so
Right.
it's not doing as much, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you can actually blend it a little bit more one way or the other. And so
Yeah.
there's a lot of little sliders. The bad part is like a lot of people are like, well, what formula do you use? I look
hmm
at it until I like it.
Okay.
That's
So
my
you don't particularly like just touch the midtones or just touch the shadows. You just kind of play with all three just to see what you
Yeah.
like.
I start with the midtones because it's going to make the most dramatic changes to the picture because almost all of the picture is going to have some midtones in it,
Midtone,
except for like this
the
area here
shadow, right.
where it's almost friggin' black behind her.
Right.
So that's where I would start to just get an indication
Okay.
of what I like. Um,
Okay.
and I would play with that. But to be real honest, I don't use this very much.
Okay.
I'm going to switch over to Photoshop
Okay.
now. And
I love it. Here's this awesome tool, but
and
that's not what we're gonna do.
and I never use it. And this is it's so different for multiple people, because some people that makes complete sense. And once you mess with the buttons and get them where you want them, you can make a preset where you just all you do is go over and it's like, teal color grading, and you hit the button and it does it. And
Right.
it's super easy, it's reproducible, it's going to do the same thing to each photo all the time. And that's what I
Sure.
like about the infinite color panel. It's what I like about David's um, plugin as well, David Bird's plugin.
Sure.
And then this is, so I'll show you. So this is I've not retouched this photo at all, but he has this thing called the Portrait Master
Yeah.
um, action, and I can
Okay.
run that. And I'll actually show you. It will show you what it does. This is for the frequency separation part of it. It builds a whole bunch of layers in about 30 seconds, and I like it because it's consistent, and I get that. But I can do the frequency separation. Then I do dodging and burning. If I want to enhance the eyes, I can do that. And then in the end, I do the color toning.
Wow. Okay.
But the only thing that I use in color toning is this one layer here.
Okay.
It's a color fill layer.
Okay.
So basically, all it does is it takes a color and it fills the whole frame with it. So you can see
Oh yeah.
this is just orange, right?
Right.
So it's going to consistently add that everywhere in the image, right? So if I make
Yeah.
it darker orange, that you're going to have darker orange. If I want to mess around with the hue, I can go, okay, do I really
Oh
want teal? Ooh,
yeah.
I kind of like that. And maybe I'll mess with that a little bit, and then I'll mess around with the tone of the teal.
Right.
And then because there's a lot of dark shadows in there, I might go with
Yeah.
a darker teal, and it's a little bit less invasive,
Right. Right.
something like that. And then
Right.
that's how, when I first started doing color grading, that's how I did. And then it ended there. That's it.
Okay.
I always ended by doing and somebody, I don't know who it was, mentioned this, and they're like, I know it's your photo because it always has this matte look.
Mhm.
So after I do a color grade, I will add a matte, and all that is a curves adjustment layer,
Mhm.
and I move the shadows up. So the shadows are on the left side, the highlights are on the right, the
On the
midtones are in the
right.
middle.
Sure.
I move the shadows up. So I'm moving the black point up, and then I take the
Right.
midtones and I bring them down, and it gives it this little matte look. And that's the way I like to do that matte look. And I'll show you how David Bird's plugin works with
So I was gonna
this.
say, do you do this manually, or do you actually have a plug that you use at the end of your pictures to do this?
I probably need to make an action that just adds this at the end, but I don't. The nice thing is if I forget to do it in Photoshop, you can do it in Lightroom as well, because
Oh,
you can just do where the histogram is in
yeah.
Lightroom
Yeah.
or in Bridge. Like if you go to, I think it has a curves. Yeah. So if you go to the tone curve,
Yeah.
I can do the same thing
Okay.
after I save it by bringing the black point up, bringing the midpoints down, and then now I just added my matte, except it's in Lightroom.
Okay.
So if I
Okay.
forget to do it in Photoshop, so to be honest, I don't waste my time with an action to do that. I just, because it takes me like 3 clicks.
Right. Right.
So now that hasn't,
I I love that last touch. That
yeah,
matte
yeah.
is just like the chef's kiss. So,
And a lot of people notice it, and they see it.
hmm
And I don't know, I learned it from David Van Diemen. He was like, you just, all you're doing is bringing the blacks up, and then you bring the midpoint down a little bit, and you sort of do that to your taste. The nice thing about doing it in Photoshop is, again, um, just a little bit of it is key. So if it looks like I'm going too far with that matte look, I can adjust it by the opacity of the layer, right?
sure.
So this is with none of it. This is with that layer about halfway turned on, and then this
hmm
is full blast, full meal
Yeah.
deal.
Yeah. I love that.
So
I love
this
that.
this is really just two small changes that I just made. I have a color, and I can show you too. I have a color fill layer, so you can add that by yourself. And it's at about 10% opacity. So you can see if I put it at 100%, it's just going to be all color, right?
All color, right?
So 10% is about where I keep it. But if it looks like it's too much, I'll drop it down to like 7 or 5. Or if I want just a little bit more, I might bump it up to 14 or 15. I rarely go above 15% opacity with that color fill layer. So I want to keep, again, I want to keep it fairly subtle. I don't want to
Yeah,
punch people in the face with teal, but you
right.
can see with the color grade and without, that
Yeah,
picture has quite a bit of a different feel to it just by adding this one layer.
right.
And that
Right.
matte, the matte is still there. I'm not turning the matte on and off. That's still there.
Mm-hmm.
So because it's a light teal, it's filling the shadows a little bit more and you can see them a little bit better. Her hair that I did not retouch is going to drive me crazy because I'm like, there's flyaways that I needed to get rid of, but I didn't do any retouching on this before we started talking. So now you just
So,
know how crazy I am in my brain.
well, we already knew that. So,
So this is my first stab at color grading. This is where I started. The
so
next,
let me ask you something real quick on that.
Mhm,
So back on that last picture, you chose, and I know it was just a color that
mhm,
you chose for this, but do you ever color grade? Like, there's a, I know I'm going to sound like an idiot when I say this. There's a color wheel, right? There's a
yep.
color wheel, and there's like complementary colors that work for. Do you follow that, or do you just kind of read whatever's in the picture? Like, for instance, to me,
Mhm,
I would look at this picture and go with the lights, with the wood, with her hair,
yep.
something like right now, that's I think that's gorgeous the
Right.
way it is.
I
But
agree.
man, you added that color,
Mhm,
and it was like all of a sudden it took it from a beautiful picture to something, and like that red even came out even more, the
yeah.
wood even came out more, like the lights in
Yeah.
the back came out more. So do you follow any rules for that?
I do try to use the color wheel when I can. So if we go back to Lightroom, and this is a really easy way to see it because they have the color wheel,
They
right?
cover the color wheel,
Right.
right?
So
Yeah,
blue is right across from orange. And if you look at the picture, there's a lot of
right.
orange in the woodwork, in her hair, even though
In
it's
her
red,
hair,
there's a lot
right?
of orange. Her skin tone is very orange.
Mm-hmm.
When my camera picked the white balance, because I always use auto white balance and I didn't correct it for this one yet, it picked up a lot of orange in her skin tone.
Sure, sure.
So there's already a lot of orange, maybe even red. So right across from there,
Is gonna be that,
yeah,
right?
technically it's blue, right? If you
Right,
want to do it completely complementary, but I went to teal, so it's in the same color family, although
right.
that looks terrible. So the color fill there is a little bit better than just
Right,
adding a whole bunch of teal in the midtones.
right.
Apparently, we just discovered that.
Okay. So is that as far as, is that a rule that you always you color grade according to the color wheel, or could you do anything else you wanted? I mean, I
Um,
know rules
yeah,
are meant to be
yeah,
broken creatively, but
yeah.
if somebody was going to criticize, would they criticize you that you didn't use the color wheel rule?
I don't know. I mean, I've been criticized for a lot of things. Not color grading according to the color wheel has never been one of them so far.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
it's just and honestly, it's what looks good to you. But like if I'm doing, and you've seen a lot of my weird horror stuff, right? I try to
Right.
break a bunch of rules. Like I'm intentionally trying to make people uncomfortable. Whether that's with the color grade, I use a lot of reds in my color grade. Even if there's orange in there,
Yeah.
I'll color grade red and it looks really it sort of looks a little off and I want people to be thrown off a little bit.
Right.
So
Right.
that's my intention. So yeah, I wouldn't color grade a fashion image that way where there was a lot of orange and then add red. Actually, let's do that. Let me
Okay.
illustrate what that would do.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
So we started at teal, which is a little bit complementary, and then we go all the way to red. And actually it doesn't
Right.
look bad.
No.
But I would definitely tone it down a lot. Like I
Yeah.
wouldn't, because her red hair, you start
Mm-hmm.
adding too much red and now all of a sudden all you see is red.
Is red.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's not bad. I mean, you could do this if you're doing a high fashion image. I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with it,
Right.
but I definitely, if I'm going to color grade this image, I'm either going to keep it in the orange orange or yellow family because that's what dominates this. And I would even
Yeah.
pull it back even further. I'd
Yeah.
probably use like a light orange, and I would probably pull that back to about 5%. So it's a little bit more subtle. So that's
Okay.
before, after.
Yeah.
Um, so, and then if you wanted to go full blue instead of teal, that's completely complementary,
Yeah.
right? And then now oh, it's more subtle, but now it's adding blue to actually the black
Yeah.
dress, which
Yeah.
is sort of funky, but I kind of like it.
Right. Yeah. Oh yeah.
So from here, I really wanted to experiment more with color grading, and as David Bird started meeting with some of us over COVID, he started talking about it, and he developed a panel for Photoshop. And so we tested it and ran it, and I really, really liked it. So that was the next thing I'm going to show you. So I used his panel on all of Christie's fashion images that I wanted to keep in the orange family.
Okay. I
Okay.
love this image, by the way.
Oh, thank
This
you.
image is awesome.
Thank you. So you can see all of I'll show you some of the things that I do or have done with the image. So before I did any color grading, that's what the image looked like before.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I don't know what I was doing here. I did a copy, and what did I do? Boy, I don't even remember. Oh, now I remember. Jeez, I shouldn't have shown you that. I used the liquify tool.
Oh,
Chris, Chris. Anyways,
that's
so
okay.
and this was pose was perfect, but anyways, we'll move on from there.
Okay.
And David's panel then adds a color grade, and I'll open up his panel, and I'll show you how it works too. What in the heck? Oh, it's a plugin. Sorry. So it's a Reimagine plugin. So you can see there's 4 styles. There's a orange and blue. There is a purple and orange. There is a like dark purple, and then there is teal and orange. So these are basically complementary to one another. This is blue and orange, this is teal and orange, but they affect your picture a little bit differently. What I've found is with a lot of photos that have a lot of orange, this style number 1 works really well. I'm not going to accept any of these changes, but I'm going to delete these layers and show you how it works. So, all right. So David's tool it's just, there's not much, I mean, there's a lot under the hood that is going on that I don't get. He had to have somebody write this for him. It takes his color grading styles and then just kind of spits them out and lets you play with the opacity of each layer that comes in. And basically you get a luminosity layer and a color layer. And I'll show you what that means in a minute. So it's picking colors and doing a bunch of stuff under the hood. So I'm going to use this style 1. It's the style I use the most of his, especially for seniors, because it's orange. Now you can see that this is really orange, right?
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
so this is not the look I wanted to go for. So I pulled the luminosity. So this is without the luminosity at all, but the color is still there. So I brought that to, I think I brought them to about 50%. So that's the luminosity panel. And then this is the color panel. And I brought that down to about 50%, I believe is what I landed on. So this is without his color grade. Well, his tool color grade. I guess technically I'm doing the color grade. I don't know. I don't know what you're supposed to say when you're using somebody else's tool. But anyway,
Right.
so this is what it does. And this is what I landed on. This is what I like for the most part. There's a few things that I make that are targeted changes when it's done. So one of the things that he has a tool in his plugin where you can add that matte look by just pushing a button, but you'll see it's a curves adjustment layer, right? And it is bringing the shadows up. Well, that's not how I do adding a matte. So I'll take the midtones and drop them down a little bit. So this is something that's easy in his plugin that's already there. I don't have to mess around with it. Generally, when I've got this much color grading with his tool already, I'll bring that matte down to about 65%. And then you can add a little bit of contrast. Oh, you can add a little bit of contrast. And what that does, you can see it with without the contrast and with it. Basically, it's just enhancing some of the highlights and then bringing out some of the shadows, or bringing down some of the shadows. One of the things that when I get done with this that I'm not necessarily, I don't necessarily, it's not my style. Her skin tone looks a lot more orange than I would like. I mean, and this is because I know Christy. I've spent an entire day with her here. I like what the background of this architecture looks like. And actually, I even think the railing with this color grade is still a little bit too orange. And this is me being nitpicky. And this is the part of the color grading where your own personal taste takes over, right? There's no rules to this. So you might look at this on your computer and go, wow, I really like that. And
Yeah.
for me, I think it's a little bit too orange, and her skin tone is a little bit too orange. So what I do is make a stamp layer. So I hit Control Alt Shift and E.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, this just copies everything below it. Okay.
Okay.
And then in Photoshop, I kind of hit the easy button and I go, okay, I'm going to use the camera raw filter, and it'll bump up, and this looks like Lightroom. And I immediately go to the HSL adjustments,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll pull down the saturation of orange.
Sure.
And I may even do that with red too, because sometimes it enhances the red too much.
Right.
And what I will do then, because I am getting really nitpicky about this. I liked how the rest of the picture looked with the orange. I didn't like how it looked here. So what I do is I'll add a mask. And this is getting outside of the color grading, although, and then I will invert the mask. So all of that I just did goes away. And then I'll paint that in where I want it to not be as orange. So I'll paint it in over her face. And I don't get too nitpicky with it. But I have to stay on her face. So right, I'm just making her face so that now it's not as orange, right? I have to do that here. And because she's wearing a black dress, this makes my life a lot easier because I don't have to worry about, if she was wearing an orange dress, this would be a nightmare. So, anyways.
Yeah, I can imagine that would be a nightmare if that, but the black is very forgiving being able to do that.
Yeah,
So
for color grading, it definitely is.
Yeah.
And then because I'm a maniac, I will go paint this in all over the whole rail.
Oh my gosh.
And so it takes a few minutes,
Right.
admittedly. And I'm also probably a little bit sloppier than I should. The problem is if I let this leak over into here, now all of a sudden you'll see a spot that's not as orange right here.
Right. Yeah.
And that'll drive me crazy. And so I got to get rid of that. Anyways, so that's the process that I use with David's plugin. I really like his plugin, but I really only, you only get 3 styles. And so I can you can go back with it. The really cool thing about his plugin though, so I got to take this stamp layer out, is if you go back and you go, well, I don't really like style 1. Let's try style 4. It'll go replace those 2 layers with the style 4. So you can go back and forth really quickly. Now you can see that it really went, her skin is way too orange.
Really orange, right?
So again, I would bring down the luminosity, bring down the color, and I would probably have to take that color off of there. But you can see there's a little bit of a teal now feel to it. And again, I really do feel like there's way too much orange here in her skin. So I would do the same thing with a mask and all that fun stuff.
It's amazing to me what color grading will also do, not only for just the picture but details. Yes. Like you see the marble more on the pillars, and you see the colors more on the windows, on the top ceiling. So it's funny what color grading will also bring out too.
And the only way to do that is to try a few different things. And I hate telling people that because everybody wants to have a formula so you can churn out 50 images all at once and barf it out and not have to worry about it. But you gotta sort of take the time to make the art and try to figure out what you want. And then you can figure out how to apply this to other photos. So now once I figured out that I liked that style 1, And then I knew what I was going to have to do with the masking for every one of these photos. Once I got done retouching it and bringing down the highlights on some of the lights because they were too bright. Once I did this, I knew about exactly the luminosity of this layer that I needed and the luminosity of the color layer. And then what I would need to do to get her skin to be where I wanted it. And actually, I think that's still too orange for my taste, but I think you see what I'm saying. And so I can consistently color grade 5 or 6 images once I finish them in Photoshop with this tool. It's really great. I love it. But I think that I wanted something different. So I'm going to show you how. So this was one of the sets with Christy that I did. I did almost all of the orange color grading with these fashion type images with all of the architecture in the background. And that was one of our sets.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is almost the same outfit. So all she did was take the skirt off and put some faux leather pants on and these boots. And then she had a coat in her bag and threw that on. That's the only change. Oh, and she put her sunglasses on.
Sure.
If you look at how this image came out of, well, so I'm cheating a little bit here too, by the way. This came out of Lightroom this way, but my light had a grid on it, but this was not dark like this. I darkened this before it came in here. And I even told her when I took this image, I was like, what I see is this rail of light going up the stairs diagonally. And I said, I want to make that happen. So what I was most concerned about is where this line was going to be with the
Where it's
shadows.
going to be, right?
And then I told her, I'm going to match it in post here. And that's what I did. So adding some dodging and burning in there to bring some focus to her. And then I started using what's called infinite color panel.
Okay.
This is the tool that, boy, what I said his name earlier. I don't remember what it is. Pratik Nayak, I think is his name. Yeah. He is.
Yes, Pratik is the editor.
Yes.
Editor.
And so you go through a bunch of his instructions on how to use this panel, but basically it's a panel that it adds a curves adjustment layer, color balance, selective color, gradient map, and color lookup. And this is what led me to what I think is going to end up being my color grading scheme and how I do things. But you in the settings tell this. Wait, is that not? You can tell it how much. Oh, intensity. So you can set the intensity. When I first got it, I had it set at 100%. 100% is way too much. So I drop it down to 50%, but basically you hit this create button and it'll throw this infinite color panel, basically these 5 adjustment layers at your image.
Wow.
And so what it does is, so it creates, it creates this folder stack of these 5 layers, and you can turn them each on and off to discover which ones you want and all that stuff. What I've found for this is the reason I like infinite color panel is you can, and maybe this sounds stupid and there's no formula to it. I just keep hitting the button and it'll just keep redoing the one that you have selected.
Right. Yeah.
And so, I actually kind of like that one too.
That is gorgeous. Wow.
And that's a little bit of a magenta rather than the blue that I was using. But when I was doing this,
her red hair and that teal jacket pops with that.
I kind of like this better. But what this infinite color panel allows me to do, or has allowed me to do over the last 6 weeks or so, is I look at, okay, which of these is actually oh boy, so there's a lot with the color balance that's getting changed. But what I've found is most of the time it's this gradient map that's doing most of the heavy lifting. And so what these gradient maps are, it's a gradient map layer, and you can pick your colors in here, right? So I can pick my color and say, rather than magenta, I want it to be blue. And I'm going to go from blue to teal. And now that completely changes the look of that photo. Wait. something just happened. It didn't change it. Why did it not change it? Well, that's very disappointing. Okay. Okay. Oh, I didn't hit
Oh,
okay
you
here.
didn't hit okay. Right. Okay.
Aha.
Yes.
And so now instead of having this overarching magenta, you've got a gradient that goes from blue to teal instead of
Mm-hmm.
magenta to teal, although I did like what I had before. The
Mm-hmm.
interesting thing about the infinite color panel is I can go into tools and now I can tell it, okay, I really like this last color grade. It will read the ones that you have turned on. And
Mm-hmm.
now I can say, I hit the plus
You
button.
you can actually set up to save that setup
Yeah.
then.
And so I can call this Christy new or whatever you want to call it.
That is freaking cool.
And so what I really like about this is it's reproducible, right? So I can pull up another image of Christy. I can take away the color grading that's there. And I can apply this new color grade that I just produced in Infinite Color Panel. And so I can just push this button and now it
Mm-hmm.
creates all, now it's going to look weird because it's got the magenta and all that in there. But now look, it's selected the layers that I selected.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it'll reproducibly, and if this was a similar picture, it would look the same, but it does not because this is completely different. It looks
Sure.
it doesn't look good. I don't like it. Um, but I did that, and what did I call that? I called that fashion one. So
Okay.
every time I came to one of these fashion looking images, once I finished them and I did the dodging and burning, all I did was click the fashion and it reproducibly added those to it. Now, what I think I'm going to do in the future is I think I'm going to build a Photoshop action that just adds this gradient map automatically. And I
Yeah.
may pick like 4 or 5 different colors to go with. And I'll probably use that because it seems like the majority of the color grading that I like is this gradient map.
Yeah.
Um, and that's, I mean, that's where I've gotten where I am. And maybe it's overly simple. I'm using other people's tools, but I am guiding what I like because you saw even with David's plugin, well, even with
Mm-hmm.
David Van Diemen's plugin, I'm picking the color and I
Yeah.
pick the opacity.
Yeah.
When I moved to David Bird's plugin, I'm using opacity, but I figured out ways to make the color match the way I want. And then now I'm stepping into this infinite color panel and I kind of like it.
Mm-hmm.
You can get it, I think, right now for like I bought the full meal deal, like a ding dong. And so there's another, you can create black and whites in, it'll do the similar things to your pictures if you like black and whites, and it'll give you different looks of the black and white just by hitting the create. I haven't really played with it too much. And I kind of feel like I probably won't use it myself, but
You don't make a lot of black and whites then.
I don't, or if I do, I do them in Lightroom.
Mhm.
I just use the monotone tool. I'll usually
Right.
mess with the contrast and the clarity a little bit, and that's
Sure.
about the extent of my because I'll look at an image and go, this looks like a really good black and white image. If it
Sure.
has a lot of contrast, I don't mess around with this a whole lot. There's also the harmony, and this is to match colors. I haven't really messed with this a whole lot.
So does the harmony just kind of read off colors that are already in the picture, and
Yep.
so that's what it's doing. Okay.
Yep, you can remap colors.
Mm,
So
okay.
I can take a color off of her face here. And then I hit the 5 button. So now I've got to find another color of orange.
Oh,
And now I've got to let's see here. Oh wait. Yeah, so I have to hit OK. Yeah, and so then it tries to harmonize the colors. I still have to like watch the training and figure out
sure.
how to use it. Because now I think that just totally messed up the picture. It looks terrible.
It's funny because I still like it because of just the different moods.
Yeah.
Like that right there. That
Yep.
just seems very moody, very dark. It's so cinematic.
Yeah.
The way that you're making it. And then even when you do change the colors though,
Mhm.
it just kind of gives you like okay, like this scene, it's very mysterious and it's
Mhm.
very like, but then you put on a different color and it's like, okay, now this change, it's more romantic.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's hilarious what color
Yeah.
will do.
And
So,
what I've found that I really like about the infinite color panel myself is I can cycle through a bunch of different color grades for an image, especially if I have no idea. And I go, huh, I really like that teal-ish, but I don't quite like it. So then I can go into these layers and I can turn them on and off and sort of figure out, okay, what can I tweak in this? And then once it's the way I want it, I can save that preset in infinite and then reproduce it on the next 4 or 5 images that I make. And so that's really cool. The other thing I discovered is this color balance layer actually helps a lot, but man, is it complicated because it's changing the midtone. And just like with the color grade tool in Lightroom, it's doing the shadows, midtones, and highlights, but you can change you know, cyan, red, magenta, green, yellow, blue for the midtones, the shadows, and the highlights. And so it can get it. Ugh, it just seems.
get pretty complicated.
I think you could mess around with this for hours and never get to where you want. And
Right.
so I want something that's simple, but that's where I'm at right now. I really think that I'm either going to just continue using Infinite Color Panel and then making a tool each time I get to a point where I want. I got to figure out how to delete these because I don't want a list of 500 of those.
Right.
Um, when I got to Yeah, so this, again, she's wearing her sunglasses, has the red wig. This is that
Hmm.
same outfit, except she has the dress on, although you can't really see it.
Right.
I'm using this matrix preset, but I'm only using the gradient map. That's it. And that
Right.
gradient map is just a teal gradient map. It goes from dark teal to light teal.
Wow. Yeah.
It's just ridiculously, it was not very hard. Um, and I decided, and it's so, and this is the other thing that you can mess around with these layers is you can decide how much of them you want. Like I can really push it, or I can back it off just with the opacity, right? So it was at 25. So maybe I decide, oh, maybe I like 20 better for them. And then for all of them that I would set up, I would just do that layer at 20%. But I think that the gradient map is probably going to be the technique that I use. The gradient map followed by the matte finish with a curves adjustment layer is probably what I'm going to do. So I want to try to figure out how to make a Photoshop action
Sure.
that will add both of those with a push of a button. And then I'll probably make 5 or 6 of them with different gradient
Different
maps.
gradients. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that's where I'm at. The biggest thing that I've learned about color grade is it's all, and I have a different approach from the three people I'm trying to get information from about color grading. They all have different approaches, but it all comes down to what looks best to you. And are you trying to hit people in the face with it, or are you trying to be real subtle? And for seniors, for seniors, I try to keep it really subtle.
Subtle.
Yeah.
Because there's like was like a photo like this,
Mhm.
you had just did you went on the gradient and you went real high, and
Mhm.
even though it looked really good,
Mhm.
the color, of course the skin turned that,
Yep.
that color, but yet at the same time it didn't look terrible.
Right.
But on my seniors, the moms are going to be like, I don't want my kid's skin
Right.
looking like Shrek or looking
Yeah.
like whoever is. So,
Yeah. And this is definitely I would call this a cinematic. This is specifically a cinematic fashion type portrait, I
oh
guess is how
yeah.
I would classify this. And
Oh
I
yeah.
sh I showed it to Christy, and we were actually even talking about the Matrix while this is one of the ones where she's standing on a chair and she's posing, which is, I don't know how she's able to do it, but we saw the skylight. And I was like, I've never really photographed the skylight. I try to keep it out of the pictures because there's so many highlights. I said, but let's
Mm.
give it a try. I took a picture and I showed it to her, and she was like, oh, that's awesome. And I was like, we need the skylight a little bit more in the picture, but I need a step stool. And she's like, well, there's a chair over there. I'm like, man, that's not going to be very comfortable. She's like, I don't care. Let's do it. And
Oh, that's cool.
she was on top of that chair for like 20 minutes. And I don't know how she did it. I mean, honestly, she put on a posing clinic. It was awesome.
She was committed, so that
Yeah.
was it.
If you ever get the chance, I don't know if she's going to go to Shutterfest again. If you get a chance to work with Christy, she's out of Louisville.
Oh, okay.
She's really cool.
I was gonna say,
Uh,
have I met her? Have I?
you may have. Let me see if I can find a picture of her actual face without sunglasses on. Maybe I have one. I know I have I took a headshot of her, a couple of them.
How long were you at the State House? Like, is that the only place that you guys went,
That
or?
was the only place we were at, which is
Okay.
sort of crazy. Um,
That's really cool that you guys do this every year, though. That's really cool.
well, I do it
That
every. I
is
do
sweet.
it. I do it every year. This is the first time I've actually worked with Christy there.
Oh, okay.
One year I took Tammy with me, and I had a makeup artist do her makeup.
Yes, I remember those. That was cool.
Where is a picture of her face? Oh, for crying out loud. I can't believe this. This is terrible. Those are not the right pictures. Those are the pictures.
Oh, there it
Okay,
is.
there we go. This is Christy.
Oh, okay.
She's an actress. So she does, this is what just blew my mind. She's an actress and model out of Louisville. That's what she does for a living.
Wow. Okay.
And so she came to Indianapolis. We did this as trade. It was awesome. It was fun. I'm gonna stop
Yeah.
recording because I think we
Okay.
probably, well, sorry. Before I stop recording, do you have questions? Because I went through a whole bunch of information.
No, that is actually very it's what I kind of expected. I
Mhm.
think I think sometimes we get so caught up and overthink
Yeah.
like the rules and all that, and sometimes we just need somebody to give us permission
Mhm.
to try it, and
Yep.
work with it and give us a little bit of guidelines to,
Right.
figure out what it is, like what do you, because I mean, I don't want to create the same art that you do, but
Right.
I am inspired by what you're doing. And oh, that's my picture there.
It is. I brought it up for a reason. But anyways, finish your thought.
But anyway, but that's just it. I just think sometimes we are our what is it, our worst case,
We're our
you
worst
know
critics. Yeah. Yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
and that we sit there and overthink things
Mhm.
when, to me, I feel like it's like, okay, this is actually a lot easier than what I think.
Mhm.
It's not as complicated as we need. And it's like, I think that I never even thought about that. As simple as it is, you can make it as much or as little
Mhm.
as you want.
Yep.
And it's really up to you, and screw everybody else who doesn't like it. So,
Right. And so when I saw your image, so I pulled it in without the preset stuff. So it looks
yeah,
like and I have this happen all the time when I'm using lights. It looks like the white balance of your camera really pushed this to blue, which is
right.
fine.
Yeah.
And then this was your edit with the color grading, and I think it's fantastic. Like,
Yeah.
it's pushed to the orange. And honestly, I was gonna say this when we were talking earlier, before I started recording, but a lot of times when I'm doing stuff where I want it to look like it's outside, I do a lot of orange color grading. And I don't
Mhm.
care if, his skin tone is a little bit orange, but
Right.
this looks like he's just looking out into the sun.
Right. Right.
I
Yeah.
think it's
Cool.
cool. I think
Cool.
this is cool. And so I looked through a bunch of the stuff that you had done, and it's great. I don't have any I it again, it's a personal taste kind of thing. Would I color grade this different? Probably, if I never saw what you had done here.
Right.
But me going through how I would color grade, I don't think is going to help you, but you see the different tools that I've applied.
Yeah.
And so there's a bunch of stuff out there.
Mm-hmm.
It's not overly expensive. I think David Van Diemen's, like the retouching action I use, I think he charges $40 for it.
Okay.
And I
Okay.
probably have used it on thousands of pictures since I've started using it. David Bird's, I think, is 60. It's a really good value for what you get. Um, it's a little limited because you only have 4 color schemes to pick
Sure.
from.
Sure.
I will say, I think, in my opinion, I think the infinite color panel is going to be the most useful for me, because if I sit down with an image and I'm like, I'm not really sure what direction I want to go, all I have to do is push that button and I just get to keep pushing it.
Right,
until
right, right. Until you
I
see
go,
something that you like.
yeah, I see something and I go, huh, that's really interesting. And can I tweak that a little bit to get, and then you go, and the light bulb goes off and you go, these 4 images that I have in this same setting are going to look really cool with this consistent color grade. Save that, apply it, and then you have a consistently color graded image coming out, and I think it's going to change the way. I think it's going to change my efficiency, certainly.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to look into that because I like him as an editor anyway.
Yeah.
But I haven't really studied what he does, so I'll
Yeah.
have to look into that. But I wanted to tell you on this image, my my inspiration as far as going with this color grade was because of his blue suit that he had
Oh
on.
yeah.
I really wanted to bring out that blue suit. I mean, he already had the red car, so
Hmm.
putting red with it just didn't make any sense, even though
Yep.
as you can look in my pictures, I did do a red gel because guess who forgot their blue gel? Me. So because I think you had given me the idea to do a blue gel.
Mhm.
Well, and I thought about that until he walked out with a blue suit, and I went,
Oh yeah.
I
Then you're
don't
like,
know.
well, the
Yeah,
blue is colored.
I
The
don't,
blue
yeah,
is
exactly.
covered.
So with the red, yeah, with the red and the blue, I thought, with the color grading, I wanted to do something that was a little more of a yellowish
Yeah.
tan, like yellow, to really make that blue pop even more. And yes, I mean, looking at it, I went back and forth on it because I thought, man, does he look jaundice? Because
No. I think this fits just as a unique image. I like how the red and the blue play off of each other, and it just looks
yeah,
like he's looking into like the sunset.
yeah, cool, cool, cool,
To
cool.
me, and his hand down here is out of that whatever this would be, the sunset
Yes,
light, so that
yeah,
this not matching that makes sense from a lighting perspective, right?
okay, okay,
Because you can see where the light, the sunlight, I'm sure
right,
this is where you had your light. It sort of cuts off right here, right? So that
yeah,
the color of that light is going to be gone
yeah,
once you get
yep,
below here. So
below there, right.
anyways, I thought it was great because I
Yay.
opened it and I was trying to figure out how to apply the presets
Mm-hmm,
that you, or
mm-hmm,
not the presets, but the
right,
editing that you had done.
yes, yeah,
Lightroom does that for you.
okay, yeah, right, right, yeah.
I didn't know that. When you load the file, it pulls the XML file with it, or
Oh, yes.
XMP file, and it just was already there. I was like, that's not what it
Okay.
looked like when I looked at it in the folder and I realized what was going on. So
Sure, 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 sure.
you taught me something by sending me those pictures.
There you go. I don't hardly use Lightroom hardly anymore because I mean, I used to be like it was what I stuck to all the time, but and maybe somebody out there, you, Brad, maybe can teach me how to organize Lightroom better because it has screwed me more than once to
Mm.
where, either if I didn't back it up or there was some kind of a update and all of a sudden I lost my catalogs or I
Ooh,
couldn't get them to oh, it was a mess. With Bridge, I
yeah,
know where all my folders are. I pull them up, they're there. I know what they get. I don't have this in between extra stuff. And I feel like I'm still doing Lightroom
right.
because Adobe Camera Raw is basically Lightroom,
It
is
is.
basically what it is.
It is exactly
So
Lightroom.
yeah. So I just kind of thought the only thing I don't like about a ACR, Adobe Camera Raw, ACR, is the fact that so Lightroom, you could take, unless I still don't know what I'm doing with Lightroom, you could take it into Photoshop, keep all your changes,
Mhm.
edit, and then it can take you back into Lightroom,
Yep.
which I
Yep.
loved.
Yep.
Adobe Camera Raw, you can't do that.
Oh man.
You basically edit, you
Mhm.
go to Photoshop, you can open and go to Photoshop, but you have to save from Photoshop. You can't go back.
Yeah. And that would
So
mess up my workflow big time because I do all of the finishing stuff in Photoshop. I'll do
yeah.
some extra adjustments. Sorry. I do those last adjustments in Lightroom before I export. And I
Hmm.
always, one of the things I do like about Lightroom is the export function, because I always export a social media file and a high resolution file for each thing that I
Hmm.
do that I've
Hmm.
finished the edit for. That's super easy. I know how it works. And so if I had to start using something else, if I had to go to exporting in Photoshop, I would probably pull my eyeballs out.
Yeah. I don't, unfortunately, I mean, the fortunate thing is I don't use Photoshop a ton. Probably about 90% of what I do is in Adobe Camera Raw. And then I because I can do the color grading within ACR. I can
Mhm.
do so if I'm going to do anything, and now I'm starting to outsource a lot of that stuff. But if I go into Photoshop, it's to clean up, because I'm guessing Lightroom is the same way, but ACR, their spot healing and masking and all that, I think sucks still.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
so and
I agree.
so I have to go to Photoshop to do that. So it's kind of one of those things where if I have an image that I have a lot of acne, I have to go save it, go to Photoshop, do the cleanup, save it Photoshop, but then I can go right back into ACR and it will save my changes,
Mhm.
from there. But it's almost like this vicious circle. And
Right.
I know people will say, well, just go to Lightroom. And I would, but it's kind of, like I said, it screwed me over a few
Yeah.
times. And I'm like, if I go back into Lightroom, I want to really properly know how to use it.
Yeah.
And no, because I feel like I did something wrong, because I lost a lot of stuff because of that.
Ooh,
So
that's no good. I will say this, I don't update Lightroom
okay.
or Photoshop very frequently because of the problems I've had with both programs.
Yeah.
I'm probably running, it's what, December 2023. I think I'm running on a 2022, like January 2022 version of Lightroom and Photoshop. So all the like AI generative fill in Photoshop, I don't use it because I don't have it.
Yep. I don't
This is
either. I'm afraid to.
because there was one time when I updated Photoshop, and I mean, I showed you the panels that I use all the time, right?
Yeah.
My actions got messed up one time in Photoshop and I had to reload those, but it really slowed my computer down in another instance. And I have a pretty fast computer. It's a gaming computer.
Yeah.
And I just don't trust Adobe. And so it's like, why am I going to mess things up when it works the way I want it to work? I want it to
Right.
work consistently. Uh, and okay, yeah, so these new bells and whistles aren't there, but I don't really care.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
No, I think there's been a few times where I don't know how Adobe does it, but there will be a couple times where it will send me to the new beta Photoshop
mhm,
where, oh, there you are. Hi. And me too. But it will we're bigger screen now.
yeah,
But it will take me to the beta Photoshop where the generative AI is,
mhm,
on there. But I've never been happy with it. I know
mhm,
people brag about how great it is, but I've tried it a couple times and I'm like, I I can't get it to work and I don't have the patience for it right now.
right.
So I'm just like, yeah, I don't. So every time it comes up, if I want to update, I'm like, no, no, thank you. I'll stay with the regular. I don't, man, I've heard horror stories, in the Shutterfest group, you've heard horror stories of people updating and they've lost all their actions, or
Mhm.
they've lost, and I can't afford that.
Nope.
I don't want to deal with that.
I don't
So
have time for that crap, man.
no, I don't have time for that. So, but anyway, well, thank you so much. I cannot wait to go and try these out. I think
Yep.
bottom line is like all these little things that I'm learning, like my editing is getting more different. I've gone more of that, more dramatic, more, I've always been kind of that way anyway, but I'm kind of, because I'm leaning towards guys more, it's a lot easier to go towards that, but I'm also trying to learn how to offer that for girls too,
Yep.
because girls like the pretty, but I do have some senior girls that are like, I actually kind of like the dramatic. I kind of like
Mhm.
to do that. Well, then how with the genre of seniors, do I do that and still have it so the moms don't sit there and go, well, I don't want a green kid. I don't.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I think you taught me how to do that, how to control the
Mhm.
balances of all that, and how to make sure that, you get it just enough to tell the story to make it cinematic. So,
Yep.
so I appreciate that.
Yep. So I guess to sort of, I guess, kind of come back and talk through where I've been. Color fill layer is where I started. it's the easiest way to get a color grade, and you can
Okay.
very easily change that color fill layer. You can do that in Photoshop. You can't do that in Lightroom or Bridge, unfortunately.
So Photoshop is it.
Yep.
Okay.
Photoshop is the only place you can add that color layer.
Okay.
If you want to back up and only do it in Bridge or Lightroom, you can use the lookup tables. The place that I got mine from is called Ludify Me.
Okay.
Um, I think it cost me like $40 for a 1 year membership, and I was able to download like 200 lookup tables.
Wow.
And like I said, I didn't really like the results, so it was one of those experiments that didn't work very well.
Could you can make your own though.
You can't. I think you can make your own lookup tables,
Okay.
but from there you can just use the color grading with the color wheels in Lightroom and Bridge, and
Right.
you can go crazy. But then you can make a preset in there where you push a button and it does the same thing every time.
Sure.
That is the advantage of that. And then from there, of course, I talked about David Bird's color grading tool that helped me a lot, sort of get beyond just the color fill layer. But I really think the gradient, adding a color gradient over the top of my images, and then messing with one of the things I guess I didn't talk about is you can mess around with the blending mode of that
Mm.
layer and change that color grade a little bit too. Um, but I think that's where I'm headed, is just using a color gradient fill um, for my color grading, along with
Well,
that curves adjustment layer.
I mean, really, if you're looking into blending and all that, I mean, if you're getting the same results and you're happy with it, I mean, it's kind of one of those work smarter, not harder.
Yep.
You know, if it's getting you the same results,
Mhm.
stick, then that, I mean, in what situation would blending really pay off that you're
Yes.
not already getting?
Yeah, that's a good question that I don't know the answer to. I've only messed around with it a little bit.
Yeah.
And so I think blending, you can use it to apply just to the dark areas of the images or just the light areas of the images, and you can get real fancy. You could have
Sure.
3 gradient layers stacked on each other. But I don't want to spend 3 hours color grading one image either. I want this to
Right.
be the last thing I do. I want it to take 10 or 15 minutes to get the color grade I want that I can apply to a couple other images and then be done with it, because I don't want to I'm already spending a whole bunch of time in Photoshop as it is.
Right. Right.
If I extend my editing to, each image now takes me an hour and 45 minutes instead of an hour.
Yeah.
That's, and then I got to get 10 images per senior out. That's not, the math doesn't work well in my favor.
No, 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 it doesn't. No, it doesn't. So,
So, anyways, I think I am going to probably stick with Infinite Color Panel for a while, just because it allows me to just regenerate different looks for a lot of the different things I do.
right.
And
Right.
I'm not trying to sell it to anybody. I think he has a sale going on right now where it's like $60 just for the Infinite Color Panel. Um, but I don't get any kickbacks. I don't know Pratik personally. I've watched his YouTube videos. That's it. I do know David Bird personally. I do know David Van Diemen personally. If people want those, I can direct them to their websites for purchase
Sure.
of those
Sure.
tools.
Yep.
So anyways, I'm going to stop
Yep. Oh,
going
that's
on
good.
and on.
Yeah, I might look at it. Pratik is pretty neat. So
He is. He is.
so I will check that. But also both Davids, they both
Mhm.
produce amazing stuff. And
Mhm.
just to help promote, David D is what I call him, but David, what's his last name?
Van Diemen.
Van. So it's not D, it's V.
Yeah,
But but he offers classes with
he
all this
does.
stuff too,
Yep.
in a studio, but you do too. So, and don't you? No, not really.
Not
No,
anymore.
not anymore.
Not
Okay.
anymore.
All right. Well, then I owe you one then
Uh,
for all this.
sure.
So,
All right. Thanks, Missy. I'm gonna try to get this uploaded into the education group. Hopefully that's okay. And
yeah,
hopefully people will
absolutely.
get something out of it. And
Yeah.
have a great night.
You too, hon. See ya.
See ya.